Hi! In this particular video, I would really like to talk about hell. And the title of this video will probably be Prison, an Extension of Hell. Now, we see all kinds of earthly examples of what a prison is, and all of them are important pictures of what it is that I want to talk about. Because what it is that I really, really want to talk about is something that is unseen. And anytime you're dealing with something that's unseen, you really cannot prove anything you're saying, basically. So, this is all about circumstantial evidence coming together that has caused me to form an opinion of what this is. And everybody needs to basically decide for themselves what they personally believe. But this is what I believe. So there is a really confusing Bible verse in the Bible that I have always thought about and really considered. And that was about when Jesus Christ descended into hell to preach to the captives. And I always thought that was very confusing and wondered how Jesus fit that in, because when he was speaking to the thief on the cross, he said, "Today you're going to be with me in paradise." So I was like, well, does that mean the thief went up and he went down to hell, preached to the captives, went right back up? I was quite perplexed about that particular picture. But I think that now I have some ideas that hell is, yes, it is a literal place, but it is a dimension. It is a dimension that is even here on earth. And I would really like to talk about that. And I remember I would get into some debates many years ago about hell and proof of hell. And while, like I said, there is no proof, I personally believe that some of the darkest acts of humanity are manifestations of hell, and shows basically that people who are tapped into the dimension of hell basically show little pieces and little chunks of what those are. And in fact, I really also believe that horror films, I'm not a person who likes horror films, I don't watch them, but I have seen a few, and people have told me about a few. And everything I have ever heard of the sort of dimension or of horror films strikes me as dimensions of hell. So let me try to break this down. If you take a single person, I personally believe that a person consists of many different pieces, and there's many different aspects to who we are. I believe that there is a higher part of our being that is connected with God, that is our sort of our spirit. It is quite divine. It has good intentions. It's quite sweet. It's really wonderful. But I also believe that there's all kinds of different parts, even below that, and to the very bottom of who we are, our more animalistic part of who we are is it's really sort of, yeah, our lower selves. It's the ugliest bits of who we are. So all these little aspects of who we are can be quite complicated. And I really personally believe that anybody who's in the dimension of hell, and that is either people who are caught in a spiritual prison, which I will talk about, or people who have not yet found Jesus as their Lord and Savior, are stuck in this dimension of hell, where they are actually incredibly connected with people's lower selves. So they see and they interact with the animalistic parts of ourselves. They see the worst of any single human being. They don't see the good things, they see the bad things. And I also believe that as we get closer to Jesus, as we believe the best, as we hope for the best, as we are walking in love, we become more and more connected to the higher parts of people. And that is a really wonderful place to be. So it is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing when you finally manage to reach that place. But you can also get knocked out of that place, and I will talk about that in just a second. So in the Bible, we really see lots of parables about forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is really key to Christianity. In fact, it's such a key, I don't see why pastors don't spend 90% of their time talking about forgiveness. Because if you're not forgiving, you are not forgiven, and it is literally your ticket to hell. In fact, in some of the parables and some of the teachings that Jesus give on forgiveness, we see directly that he states that if we do not forgive, we will be handed over to the tormentors. And I personally believe that the lowest part of hell is the place of torment. And the place of torment is a place of extreme pain and extreme horror. And that is where the very lowest parts of humanity are. And that is the scariest. I mean, if you think of the cannibalistic parts, the most extreme selfish parts, the serial killers, the darkest acts of humanity are found in the place of torment. And that is where you go. I personally believe if you are holding grudges against people and you are completely unwilling to forgive and you are completely unwilling to let go. So hell as a place, I believe, is where a good lot of humanity is. And then you have the lower place of torment, and that is where the most diabolical people end up, and those are where the most unforgiving people, because sin and unforgiveness goes, in my opinion, hand in hand. So the Bible is very strict. You have to forgive. If you're not forgiving, then you are in terrible danger of obviously not reaching the kingdom of heaven, and if not hell, then the lower parts and the place of torment. So it is a very serious thing. That being said, there are loads of people right now who are actively not forgiving their brothers or their sisters or their neighbors or their loved ones or their husbands or their wives. And they're doing that. They're basically keeping that person in a spiritual prison. And that is one of the things that goes back to the spirit of religious control, where somebody is basically keeping a person captive in a spiritual prison through unforgiveness. And that is one of the reasons why it is so serious and why it can really send a person into the lower parts and the lower regions, the place of torment, because it is such a cruel thing to hold unforgiveness against a person and to really extract from them life. So forgiveness is incredibly important. And of course, God has a lot of grace for us. He really works with us to try to get us to the place of forgiveness. But forgiveness is absolutely vital. You will not be forgiven unless you yourself forgive. But there is a real danger in causing offense and causing unforgiveness, because there are countless of people who are really trapped in a spiritual prison in hell, not the place of torment, but in hell. And those people are constantly stuck. They are lonely. They are isolated. They are hurting. They are not getting anything good. They are being persecuted. There's lots and lots of people in that dimension of hell, and lots of unforgiveness. And, one prisoner sometimes does what they can to keep other people prisoners. So it is a very bad, self-defeating cycle for anyone to be in prison. So one of the ways that you absolutely can see the apostate church is in the number of prisoners, people who are trapped without anything good coming their way, people who are moaning underneath the burden of the Egyptians, people who are really truly suffering in spite of doing maybe everything right. They just can't, because there's somebody in their life who is just extracting goodness. And those people try to kill their other people's faith in God, and so on and so forth. So this is incredibly serious, and definitely one of the reasons why unforgiveness can win a place in the lower parts of in the place of torment. So people should absolutely do what they can to avoid that by forgiving. And this is a pillar of Christianity. So I really personally believe that when we look at prison as we see it, we see people who are, they do something wrong, they commit some crime in society, and they are thrown away. They aren't able to have a life. They aren't able to have a family. They aren't able, maybe they can get letters, maybe they can send out letters, but their life is basically taken from them for a year, to 2 years, to 5 years, to 10 years. And there are people who are literally making spiritual prisoners through their unforgiveness. Now, we are not totally at the mercy of somebody else's unforgiveness. If we have plenty of other people around us who love us, pray for us, and accept us for who we are, and understand that mistakes can happen, they can really keep us pulled out of that place. But if we are surrounded by highly condemning people who are also prisoners themselves, who like to see people punished and hurt, and are ran by a religious and spiritual controlling spirit, those people will actively fight to keep others as spiritual slaves so that they can take advantage of them. So it is extremely difficult once you have fallen into a spiritual prison to actually get out. And so when a Jesus type person comes onto the scene, they usually always preach to the captives, which is you're forgiven and you're loved, and nobody's perfect, and you don't have to be perfect. You are accepted in the blood. And that is why the gospel is such good news, because there are countless of people trapped in a prison, in a spiritual prison, because of unforgiveness. People who have a difficult time forgiving themselves, and people who aren't really receiving forgiveness or grace from their fellow man. So we have a real big problem, and as we see that unforgiveness becomes more and more prevalent in society, we are seeing more and more people fall into spiritual slavery and spiritual prison. And I believe that is on earth. And of course, people can die in that state and so on and so forth. I don't believe that place, it's not quite as blessed as being in the kingdom of heaven. There's talk about people who are cast out of the kingdom, and there's weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. And so it's a very tragic thing to be left out of the kingdom of heaven. But the dimension of hell is not the place of torment. The place of torment is really where the most hellish, diabolical blips that you could possibly imagine, or that you've ever seen in a horror film or anything else like that, plays out. So hopefully this video is showing you the dangers of unforgiveness, and hopefully will help you forgive those people in your life, because whatever anybody has ever done to you, you've done yourself, and maybe even 10 times worse. And by not forgiving a person, you are withholding them from the goodness of God, and that is a very serious thing, incredibly serious thing. So that is my video on hell.